She went from 90-day fiancé firecracker to facing federal removal. And no one, not even TLC, saw how fast it would all spiral. Jasmine Pineda, the drama magnet who practically carried seasons on her back with explosive jealousy and those infamous eye rolls, is now staring at a life permanently shut out of the US, with her career in shreds and her kids stuck thousands of miles away. Forget tell-alls, this meltdown is writing its own chaotic finale in real time. Welcome to TLC Drama Files. I'm Oliva, and if you're ready for the receipts, regret. And reality check Jasmine never counted on. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, did you ever think she'd end up here? Because it all hinges on one truth. Once her marriage to Gino collapsed, everything else went with it. Behind those edited confessionals and cute filter-heavy IG stories, the real Jasmine's immigration status was hanging on one thin thread, her marriage. And when Gino checked out emotionally, legally, it was game over. What started as a volatile but functioning partnership unraveled so fast that it sent ripples straight into the hands of U.S. immigration officers. To them, her on-screen outbursts weren't memes, they were red flags. So, what did Jasmine do when cracks in her green card foundation started to show? Allegedly, nothing. No new representation, no successful appeals, and no formal update on her legal eligibility to stay. And that quiet? That's what ended up speaking the loudest. But before courtrooms and custody battles, there was TLC, a platform that took her chaos and made it entertaining. For a while, they leaned in. Screams, sobbing, walkouts in airport parking lots, ratings gold. But while fans loved the roller coaster, insiders say production staff were less amused. What fans saw as cringe content, crew started seeing as workplace risk. Rumors had already swirled for months that Jasmine had been difficult off-camera. Not just emotionally reactive, but unpredictable, even aggressive. Producers were used to cast drama, not cracked lighting stands and bruised egos behind the scenes. And that's where the silence started getting loud. When the marriage hit a wall, reportedly hard, final, and not amicable, TLC didn't issue a press release. They didn't even give a warning. They pulled back, slow and quiet. Bookings disappeared. Screening schedules were quietly adjusted. And Jasmine? That lifelong dream of influencer deals, reality spin-offs, and green card security, it started looking more like a bad joke everyone but her was in on. While she was still posting eyeliner selfies and throwing shade at haters on Instagram, production meetings were being held about legal exposure. Because her residency was built on a marriage that no longer functioned. Not privately, not legally, and definitely not publicly. And when you're involved in a show that requires U.S. residency to even film, that's a problem someone can't filter over. What made this mess unstoppable was the domino effect. First, the relationship collapses. Then, her legal paperwork teeters. Now, whisper networks across production sets are full of, "Did you hear she's done?" instead of, "When's her next scene?" The question now isn't whether Jasmine will leave the U.S. The real suspense is how ugly it gets before she's forced to. And if you thought she had a support team working overtime to save her, you're going to want to stick around. Because the next break in this story, it doesn't come from Jasmine. It comes from what Gino didn't do, and what ICE allegedly found when they started looking closer. Retention hook. But why did TLC fire her before anything was even proven? The answer involves cameras, paperwork, and one dangerous tantrum no one ever saw on TV. When Jasmine accused Gino of talking to other women, fans laughed. When she went off over a bottle of shampoo, memes followed. And when she snatched his hat and flipped out over DMs, producers probably celebrated. Drama sells, but immigration judges, they don't hand out green cards for entertainment value. Because while TLC turned Jasmine's emotional extremes into cliffhangers, those same explosions cast serious doubt on the stability of her marriage. A fact that matters when your entire immigration status depends on proving your relationship is real, not staged. Inside the courtroom, jealousy doesn't look spicy. It looks suspicious. Her breakdowns weren't just side plots. They were behaviors that, once documented on national television, became evidence. Paper thin or not, the image of their marriage was everywhere. And once it soured, immigration officials reportedly started connecting dots between her on-screen volatility and the off-screen collapse. The truth is, Jasmine wasn't removed because she was dramatic. It's what that drama implied about the marriage. The yelling, the accusations, the unresolved trust issues. They didn't tell a story of two people building a life. They made it look like a slow-motion disaster. And when you're applying for a spousal visa, you have to prove that your relationship isn't fake, coerced, or transactional. Now here's where it gets messy. Did TLC know this marriage wouldn't last? Were they documenting a love story or quietly capturing the unraveling? Because whispers inside production circles suggest this wasn't a surprise. Some even believe that the show kept cameras rolling not despite the chaos, but because of it. Gino and Jasmine were gold for ratings, but poison for every immigration checkpoint they had to pass together, especially once the marriage hit the rocks for real. And Jasmine's behavior on and off camera didn't exactly scream, green card approved. Think about it. Agents watching scenes where you scream, "You ruined my life," to your own sponsor aren't going to assume things ended amicably. And here's a genuine, complicated twist. Jasmine wasn't pretending to be angry. She probably felt every emotion. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the insecurity. All of it was raw. But the way she handled it played out in front of an audience and a legal system that was never supposed to be part of the viewership. This is where reality TV gets dangerous. Because once your truth is edited into content, you don't control how it lands. Jasmine's most iconic scenes cemented her as a series icon, but they also laid bare the cracks in her relationship and opened the door for legal consequences TLC never had to face. But she did. And that's the brutal irony. The same moments that made Jasmine unforgettable might be the exact ones that convinced immigration officials her marriage was never strong enough to begin with. Retention hook. But if drama was so good for ratings, what made TLC finally say enough? The answer lies in an off-camera explosion that almost shut down production. Completely. There's a reason TLC never aired. Jasmine's final explosive moment, because this one didn't, end in a dramatic confessional or clever edit. It ended in broken equipment, a bruised staff member, and a decision the network couldn't walk back. Behind the scenes of Jasmine's final season, things got ugly. Way worse than any pillow-throwing tantrum or screaming fit we saw on TV. According to multiple production insiders, Jasmine allegedly had a total meltdown during shooting. Not just yelling, not reality TV drama, full-on incident. Equipment was destroyed. At least one crew member was reportedly injured trying to de-escalate the situation. Security got involved. And the cameras? They were no longer rolling for content, they were witnesses. And that was the final straw. Up until that point, TLC had given Jasmine a long leash. Let's be honest, a very long one. She'd screamed, sobbed, accused, called out, threatened, broken down in public, and brought chaos into every room like it was part of her contract. And in a way, it was. Drama is business. But off camera, there's a line. And Jasmine crossed it. Eyewitnesses say this wasn't a one-off outburst. It came after weeks of mounting tension. Fights between her and Gino were stretching past the usual arguments and creeping into dangerous territory. Crew members were allegedly feeling uncomfortable. Some were reportedly refusing to work with her altogether. And TLC, a network that built its empire on messy couples, found itself staring down an entirely different risk. Liability. See, it's one thing to encourage chaos for television. It's another to keep someone on payroll who poses a danger to staff. And behind the curtain, executives started asking hard questions. Not about ratings, not about fan engagement, about insurance, about legal exposure, about lawsuits. Because once the crew isn't safe, the cameras stop being fun. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, someone made the call. Jasmine was done. No press release. No exit interview. No parting ways on good terms. She was yanked from production quietly. Her scenes wrapped early, and everything else left to float on speculation. TLC wasn't going to air footage that could raise questions about their own responsibility. Instead, they buried the incident behind vague scheduling changes and barely there statements. But the silence didn't stop the snowball, because ICE was already monitoring Jasmine's immigration status. And production companies are required by law to verify employment eligibility. So when her visa's legitimacy got flagged and sponsors, like Gino, were no longer backing her, guess who they called first? That's right. TLC had to hand over documentation. And now, immigration enforcement had more than missing paperwork. They had an unstable marriage, a withdrawn sponsor and evidence alleged, but serious, of aggressive behavior caught during a professional shoot. And once ICE gets involved, it's no longer about crew members or contracts. It's federal business. The most shocking part? Jasmine reportedly had no idea she was on borrowed time. She thought if she could fix things with Gino, ride out the season, and keep the drama going, her spot on the show and her status in the US would survive. But TV has limits, and by the time she realized how far she'd pushed past them, the door was already closed. So if you're wondering why Jasmine vanished from upcoming promos, disappeared from TLC social pages, and stopped posting updates about filming, it's not because she was taking a break. She was being cut off, completely, internally flagged, officially cut loose, because when the cameras stop rolling, who protects the crew? Not Jasmine, and TLC finally chose them over her. Retention hook. But behind every fired cast member is the moment the paperwork breaks. And for Jasmine, ICE wasn't the only one raising questions about her past. Wait until you hear what showed up in her immigration file. Jasmine didn't just lose her shot at American stardom, she may have tripped herself on the way in. While social media focused on her obsession with Gino's hat and text messages, immigration officers were combing through something far less dramatic, but way more damaging, her paperwork. And what they found? It didn't just raise eyebrows. It raised flags. According to multiple agency sources tied to the case, Jasmine's immigration file wasn't clean. And not clean doesn't mean a missing form. It means timelines that didn't match, job histories that fell apart under verification, and marriage records that didn't line up with her public claims. In other words, a profile that didn't just look messy, but potentially manipulative. Now, here's where things get real for anyone trying to come to the US on a spousal visa. You're not just asked if you're married. You're required, legally, to prove that marriage is valid, ongoing, and entered into in good faith. There's a mountain of forms, financial disclosures, joint accounts, photos, tax records. Every detail has to fit. If it doesn't, they assume the worst, that the marriage is fake. And in Jasmine's case, the cracks were everywhere. Officials reportedly found issues with the order of her prior relationships, dates that seemed off, a previous marriage that wasn't consistently listed, even discrepancies in her Panama to USA timeline that suggested someone wasn't telling the whole truth. These weren't small typos. They hinted at either a lack of transparency or a willful attempt to game the system. Was it intentional? Or was Jasmine overwhelmed, underadvised, and overly confident? That's still debated, because while some call it fraud, others insist she got caught in her own chaos, failing to track her past while chasing a very unstable future. But under immigration law, that excuse doesn't carry much weight. There's no "I forgot" clause when you're applying for legal residence. And guess who else gets dragged into the mess? Her sponsor, Gino. If Jasmine submitted information that wasn't true and he signed off, knowingly or otherwise, that opens him up to serious scrutiny, financial liability, perjury even. So it's no surprise that once the discrepancies surfaced, Gino reportedly backed away from his obligations fast. He stopped attending legal appointments, stopped replying to formal requests. She was suddenly alone, with no legal team, and no husband to anchor her. Application. And here's the part Jasmine likely never expected. The very documents she submitted to start. Her new life in America may be what sends her back the fastest, when paperwork is treated like a suggestion instead of a legal requirement. The consequences hit hard. In Jasmine's case, they hit at the worst possible time, when she was already losing her marriage, her show, and her credibility. Retention hook. And just when Jasmine thought things couldn't spiral further, her own lawyer, the one person who could have defended that paperwork, quit the case without warning. What pushed them to walk away? You won't believe how serious it got. When Jasmine's lawyer dropped her case, it wasn't with a press conference or a polite email. It hit like a silent alarm. 1 minute, she had legal backing. The next, she was standing alone, mid-crisis, while the court kept demanding answers nobody had prepared her for. And with immigration officers already circling, that silence said everything. This wasn't about missed appointments or unpaid invoices. According to sources close to the legal team, the decision to step away came after internal conflict over Jasmine's case materials. Things reportedly didn't add up. And when a professional law firm suspects that a client might have submitted false or misleading statements, even accidentally, keeping that client could put the entire firm at risk. Behind closed doors, alarms were already blaring. Alleged inconsistencies tied to marriage timelines, financial gaps no one could fill in, missing employment verification. One source said the firm feared material misrepresentation, legalese for info that wasn't just wrong, but wrong enough to look intentional. And if a lawyer suspects their client hasn't told the full truth, they have an ethical obligation to walk away. For Jasmine, it couldn't have hit at a worse time. Not only had Gino stopped backing her as a petitioner, but now her most important ally, the person supposed to defend her case in court, refused to represent her at all. And this isn't family court where rescheduling is easy. Immigration court doesn't wait. The judge still needs documents, still needs clarification, still needs a reason not to sign off on removal. Instead, all Jasmine could offer, in that moment, was silence. No new lawyer, no revised testimony, and no honest path forward that didn't start by addressing the gaping holes in her record. Meanwhile, her departure deadline was closing in. ICE doesn't wait for you to find the right words. They simply enforce the law with whatever evidence is left on the table. And when your own lawyer won't put their name behind your case, how much more proof does the system really need to show? You might not belong in it anymore. Retention. Hook. Gino was next, and the government wanted answers from him too. But instead of stepping up, he stepped away fast. The question is, did he know more than he ever let on? Gino wasn't just Jasmine's ex, he was her legal lifeline. As her sponsor, his signature backed her presence in the U.S. His name supported her visa. His affidavit pledged financial responsibility to the government. Without him, her immigration case didn't just weaken, it collapsed. And yet, at the very moment she needed him most, Gino disappeared from the picture. He stopped returning legal calls, pulled back from court communication, didn't submit statements. For a man who was once ready to marry her in front of millions, his exit was fast, strategic, and quieter than anyone expected. So is Gino protecting himself? Or hiding something? It's fair to assume he saw the cracks forming long before the cameras stopped rolling. Maybe he even knew about the paperwork discrepancies. Or maybe he didn't, and simply wanted nothing more to do with the mess. But legally, Gino's exposure was real. If Jasmine's submissions were false, and he co-signed anything inaccurate, knowingly or not, the government could question his integrity. Fines, civil liability, even investigations. He didn't need to go down with her, and he knew it. This wasn't an emotional breakup. It was tactical retreat, and when her attorney quit and court filings began to unravel, Gino all but vanished. He never defended her publicly, never clarified his role. The man who once proposed with Christmas lights on his ceiling withdrew everything: money, help, even his voice. And in a case where silence makes people suspicious, Gino's isn't just quiet, it's deafening. Retention hook. As her last support vanished and the court moved forward, ICE made their next play. And it wasn't about the show. It was about separating Jasmine from her children permanently. The moment Jasmine's removal order became official, everything changed. It wasn't reality TV anymore. It was federal enforcement. ICE wasn't knocking yet, but the countdown had started. She had a deadline to leave the country. Voluntarily, quietly, alone. And that's the part that nearly broke her. Because her children, the ones she fought so hard to bring closer, aren't coming. Not now. Not under these terms. Immigration law doesn't bend for broken families. Once her status was deemed non-legal, Jasmine lost any legal authority to petition for them. Her kids are blocked from entry, full stop. The system doesn't care how much she cries on social media or what her followers think is unfair. To ICE, it's simple. Her visa was conditional, her marriage dissolved. Her paperwork is questionable. So the deal is off. Now comes the hardest part. Jasmine has two choices: leave the country and say goodbye to her children indefinitely, or stay in the U.S. illegally, risking arrest, detention, and permanent bans. There is no middle ground, no loophole, no TLC rescue storyline. If she overstays her order, reunification with her kids on U.S. soil becomes almost impossible. Forever. Sources close to Jasmine say she's emotionally unraveling behind the scenes. Not because of TLC, not even because of Gino. Because she knows that leaving means she might not hold her children for years, maybe ever. And what once felt like legal juggling suddenly became heartbreak no immigration officer can fix. Retention hook. The courts had spoken. The show had dropped her, and her lawyer was gone. Now TLC made it official. Zero tolerance. Zero contract, zero future. But was it business or payback? TLC dropping Jasmine wasn't a casting change. It was a clean break. No soft send-off, no spin-off potential, no goodbye montage over sad music. Just silence. One day she was a main character. The next she was scrubbed from promos, her social handles quiet, her name missing from all filming rosters. Internally, the message was clear. She wasn't a personality anymore. She was a liability. Because Jasmine didn't just bring fireworks to scenes, she started to light fires behind the camera too. And once lawyers get involved, producers stop asking what makes good TV and start asking what keeps them out of court. Jasmine ticked too many boxes no network wants near their brand. Violent outbursts, legal instability, federal scrutiny, an unpredictable temperament, and allegations of fraud. That's the kind of drama no edit can rescue. What made it worse? Her on-screen persona and off-screen behavior started blurring. TLC may have crafted her as the spicy, passionate love interest, but off-camera reports said she was getting harder to manage. Tougher for the crew. A risk no one wanted to claim, and this is where reality TV gets exposed. The very traits that gave Jasmine screen presence, the impulsiveness, the jealousy, the raw emotion, weren't sustainable once they became real-world problems. TLC profited from the chaos, but they didn't stick around to help clean it up. That's not betrayal. That's TV Jasmine, who once built a platform on being unfiltered and dramatic. Watch that same reputation shut every door she was counting on. Because in the end, what TV made famous, the law erased, and not even her biggest scenes could make her story marketable anymore. Retention hook. With her career gone and her family out of reach, Jasmine faced one last decision: obey the court or risk becoming a fugitive. And time wasn't on her side. With no lawyer, no sponsor, and no valid visa left to lean on, Jasmine isn't out of options. She ran out of them. And worse, every day she waits, the damage multiplies. That court order to voluntarily leave the U.S. isn't an open invitation. It has a deadline. Miss it or delay too long, and immigration officers don't offer second chances. They show up at your door. Sources say Jasmine is caught in limbo, emotionally paralyzed, possibly hoping it'll all reverse itself if she just stays quiet. But legally, that silence is a nail in the coffin. ICE doesn't see hesitation. They see non-compliance. And once voluntaries expire, forced removal becomes the next step, with penalties that outlive any breakup or television contract. Even if she found a new lawyer tomorrow, there'd be very little they could do. No solid case, no appeal path, no solid footing to argue hardship. And public sympathy alone doesn't count in immigration court. You can cry on TikTok. You can't cry in front of a federal judge and expect that alone to cancel a removal order. Here's what's on the line now: not only being detained, but being permanently banned from ever entering the U.S. again. That includes visitation. That includes efforts to reunite with her kids. One wrong move here, and future applications could be auto-denied forever. And that's not drama. That's law. She's not choosing between two hard options anymore. She's walking a legal tightrope with no net underneath, and ICE is watching, closely, quietly, constantly. One mistake, and the U.S. border stays closed for life. Retention hook. The heartbreak wasn't over. Jasmine's next blow came not from courts or customs, but from a truth even tougher than deportation: leaving without her children. Imagine packing your bags not because you want to, but because the country you've built your hopes in no longer allows you to stay. Jasmine Pineda isn't leaving on her own terms. She's leaving as a last resort, under threat, with her children stuck on the other side of a legal wall she can't break through. Back in Panama looks like her only option, but not as a fresh start. More like a forced reset without the people she came here fighting for. Her kids are still blocked from entry. She can't sponsor them, can't petition, can't even visit freely if she overstays and gets banned. And even though Jasmine has posted family pics and spoken tearfully about motherhood, right now those emotions don't unlock a single legal door. The emotional weight? Crushing. What started as a TV love story and a shot at stability has turned into a full-blown unraveling, out in public, plastered in headlines. She's now the face of a different reality. Not the kind you stream for laughs, but the one where you bow out under pressure while the world scrolls past your pain. Close sources say Jasmine's mood has darkened rapidly. Anxiety, isolation, total detachment from her usual spark. The drama she once weaponized on screen is now eating away at her offline. And stability? It's not just legal anymore, it's mental. Because going back is one thing, but going back alone? In the end, Jasmine might cross that border. But her story stays behind, unfinished, unfixable, and forever missing the two people who mattered most. When you lose the fight, what happens to the ones you left behind? Retention hook. And just when it felt like rock bottom, Jasmine's public silence said more than any statement, because her next chapter isn't about TV or law. It's survival. Once Jasmine Pineda was the woman you couldn't scroll past. Every post a storm, every fight a headline, every tear-packed frame turning into its own viral moment. But now, she's vanished. Not just from TLC, not just from court filings. From everything. No reels, no updates, no cryptic quotes. And when a social media addict goes quiet, it usually means one thing. Something's happening she can't control. ICE doesn't need to make noise. They monitor, they track, they wait. Jasmine is now officially flagged, reportedly categorized under high-risk immigration surveillance. Not because she staged a drama for television, but because she ignored the real deadlines that followed. No exit, no compliance, no legal backup. And every hour she stays silent, that shadow grows. Her fans? The same ones who once flooded the comments with support have mostly disappeared. Even some of her highest engaging Instagram posts sit untouched now, like digital ruins. The platform that once helped her build influence now reflects total stillness. And that might be the loudest part of this story. We're not watching a public figure fade. We're watching them freeze in place, mid-collapse, and the reason why hurts more than any edit. Because Jasmine always performed her pain. She made it photogenic. She turned heartbreaks into stories. But now, when it's real, raw, and endless, there's no performance. There's no filter that makes this part digestible. She's lost leverage, visibility, sympathy, and maybe even the right to speak freely without legal consequences. One word out of place, and ICE could use her own post as evidence. Welcome to reality TV's ultimate plot twist. No more camera crew, no more reunions, just federal code and what's left of your courage. Jasmine's silence isn't branding, it's survival. In her world, there's no next episode. No redemption arc in the next season. Because she tried to play the US system the same way she played TV, with tension, appeal, and spectacle. But the law doesn't flinch, ICE doesn't rewind, and once the network cashes out, you're left with the receipts and the reality. What started as a bid for love ended in legal exile. Her downfall wasn't one moment. It was a series of choices she thought no one would hold her accountable for. And now, every echo of her former life, the camera-ready makeups, the dramatic breakups, the fast-edited fights, sounds hollow. Because behind all that noise was a woman who didn't just lose her shot at fame. She lost her future in a country she pinned everything on. Her fight with ICE isn't about screen time anymore. It's about minutes ticking down to her next move. If she even has one left. From reality TV star to immigration target. That's the arc TLC didn't write, but one Jasmine's living in silence. But hey, Gino's not off the hook either. He may have walked away at the right time, or maybe it was just in time to save himself from a scandal with his name on it. You won't believe what's allegedly still sitting in the unreleased footage. That's all coming up, right here on TLC Drama Files.